Hi, and welcome. This is Jeannie Vitoni, and I'm here today with Wendy Conquest and Kim Litton. And we're on the Conversations podcast at the ITAP Symposium. So we're kind of on the road today. And we're very happy to have an author and colleague, Kim Litton, talking about her book. And so I just want to welcome everyone. We're doing things a little different today, and I hope you enjoy this podcast episode.
That's great. And so we are here with Kim, and this is her book, I Do It For Her, a memoir of recovery and redemption from sex, love, and substances. So Kim, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you both so much for having me and just welcoming me and for working and doing what you do in this industry.
Can you tell us how the symposium's been going for you?
Oh, I love the symposium because I love to meet people. I love to socialize. I think it's great for us therapists to socialize with other therapists, especially I'm in private practice, so it can get kind of lonely being just on the listserv or just, on the phone consulting or whatever. So to just be in the presence of other clinicians and meeting new people and finding new friends, throughout the country is what I love the best. My little social extrovert gets to come out,
That's great. We want to thank ITAP because they provided us the space to be able to do these interviews. So appreciate that.
So Kim, can you tell us about the book? Tell us the title of the book and how the book even came to be.
Absolutely. The title of the book is I Do It For Her, a memoir of recovery and redemption from sex, love, and substances. And how it came to be, it was a long story. I have been in recovery from drugs and alcohol for 21 years. And I did not know it at the time when I checked into treatment for drugs and alcohol. But now that I look back on it, the signs were more than clear that I had a sex and love addiction. Yet it was never brought to me by the clinical staff. I was never educated about it. The only thing I was told to do was by my sponsor, you don't have a relationship for a year. And I'm like, why? Why? So I didn't have a relationship, but I did have a bunch of sex. Because again, like I had no idea why she was telling me such a thing. And so, off I went, and I married fairly quickly into drug and alcohol recovery, a sex addict, discovered his sex addiction in our marriage. And then through that marriage, it turned more domestic than anything. It was domestic violence that made us split for good. And then I started acting out as a divorced single mom of 2 kids. I was acting out on the weekends that they were at their dad's. I'm a practicing therapist. I was, clinical director of a treatment facility and acting out on Tinder, Snapchat, all the things that we hear from our clients, I was doing. And boy, did it occur to me, there's a problem here. Of course, a lot of pain had to happen first. I mean, suicidal pain. It was worse than the pain that I felt in chemical dependency. It really was. And it baffled me that I had gotten myself to such a place in recovery from drugs and alcohol. But I was in a pool of shame for being a mother and acting such a way, for being a therapist and acting such a way, for helping women. And while I'm still acting out, all of that shame was just built up. And plus, at the same time, I was having casual sex with men. I mean, young men, in their 20s, and I'm maybe like a 40-year-old or late 30s single mom. And waking up the next morning dying for them to love me, like wanting them to like want to be with me again. Like I wanted them to say, I can't wait to be with you again. I can't wait to see you again. I wanted them to wake up next to me and take me to breakfast. And instead they were rolling over and putting their clothes back on and leaving, or they weren't even there because it was just a booty call. You know what I mean? Like I wanted that. And yet my behaviors were constantly seeking people who couldn't give me that.
And then how did you move into recovery at some point here?
The pain.
Pain.
Yeah, I think the pain got me there. And, you know, great support. Again, I was in AA, which is 12-step support. So I did have a very solid sponsor who I felt open to. I was always open to therapy and going. I did. I just, so like I said in my presentation today too, the recovery for us kind of looks more like the frequency, the length of time spent acting out, and the intensity lesson over time. It doesn't look like, okay, I'm going to stop my behaviors. Yes, I mean, that can look like that. I'm not saying it doesn't, but it's more unrealistic to think I'm going to stop my behaviors altogether and just be in recovery, right? So what it looks like for us is more of the intensity, the frequency, and the length of time spent acting out lessons over time. So gaining that insight and realizing, oh, when I put my hand on the burner, it burns.
And when you say us, you're referring to female sex and love
I'm
addicts?
referring to female sex and love addicts, yes, as I identify as one now.
Okay.
So let me ask you a question.
Yeah, please.
Can I? Yeah. So for a lot of women, it seems really hard. And I can't even imagine you writing this book and coming out publicly. How has that been for you?
Well, thank you for asking, Wendy. That was my hardest. This is my hardest. I mean, of my whole lifetime. That's the hardest thing I've ever done, was to publish a book that's so raw and so real. I mean, but every time I found myself editing out the hard parts or editing out the vulnerable, raw parts, I was like, wait a minute, I would think about the woman who needs to hear the raw and vulnerable parts. This isn't for my parents. This isn't for people who are going to judge me. This isn't for people in my hometown that may judge me, or people at my church that may judge me. This is for women who are suffering out there, and that's just what I kept in my forefront. Like, this is for other women. This is for other women. And I think that God brings us through things. I'm very spiritual, and I have a God of my understanding. And I truly believe that He brought me through these things so that I could be a voice. And not only that, made me a clinician so that I could kind of weave the clinical in with the story to help other people. And I truly believe it's my responsibility as I'm living an earthly life right now to do this work. And so that's what kept me going. Yet the shame, it was unbelievable. I would stop and start. It took me 5 years to write the book.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to comment on the bravery of that. Like you said, the 5 years to write it, but there's also the prep of thinking about it beforehand and making the decision, and to keep the vulnerable parts in. I love what you're saying in my mind, because I think a lot about mission statements and values. And, what am I trying to convey? Why am I doing this? What is my motivator for this?
Yes.
And so what I'm hearing you say is that for you, one of the motivators was, I want to be of help and service to others.
Yes.
And so to keep those vulnerable parts in there, because that's what a lot of people need to hear, want to hear, to feel like maybe they're not so alone. What are some other parts that you would like for folks to take away from your book?
The hope.
Tell us about that.
The hope of recovery, but not just recovery, like freedom. Just the hope of we can have freedom. I never, 21 years 21 years ago today, guys, May 18th, May 19th is my anniversary. I was sitting in a Miami detoxing from heroin and Oxycontin. And to think that I would even be sitting in somewhere like this today, speaking to you guys on a podcast and then speaking to an audience about female sex and love addiction was so far removed from that is just, so the hope and then the freedom that like it is, you can literally do anything, the sky's the limit.
For a lot of people, I think, and especially for when it's difficult for men and women both, I think, to say, oh, how can a woman be addicted to sex? That I think that's an idea that a lot of people are very confused about. And we sometimes talk about, women aren't really addicted to sex, but addicted to sex and love. Do you talk about the being addicted to love in the book?
I sure do. I speak about that in the book because exactly, it's not a very clear-cut definition, right? And I will have to say, I think for every one of us women, it looks different. It can. But yes, there are myths that we are just like nymphomaniacs and while that may be true for some, that's not true for, I feel like the majority of us. For me, it started when I was a young teenager. I was desperate. I was a lost child in my family, and I was desperate to be seen and looked at and valued. Looking back on it, I see that my parents did value me, but like that's with a lot of healing. Yeah, I did not feel, and I have to honor that piece of my little girl, that didn't feel like she was ever seen. And so, buddy, when that first boy looked at me and thought I was cute and wanted to talk to me, that was everything to me. That was everything. And he had so much power over me. When I lost my virginity to him, or not to him, but when I lost my virginity, and then I lost my virginity so that I would be experienced for this guy that I had on this pedestal and that I loved so much. And so I learned about sex with him. He was 3 years older. We had sex 3 and 4 times a day. We had different kinds of sex. So I learned how to please a man. He taught me how to please a man. And to me, growing up how I grew up, I thought that pleasing a man was love. As long as I please him, he loves me. And so that's how it was tied in for me. The sex was equaled love, right? For me. The more sex I can have with him, the more he'll love me and want to be with me. If I can get dirty and nasty and, then the more he'll want to be with me and not want to go out and cheat on me because I'm doing the things that the girl cheated on, Those kinds of absolute, just kind of betrayals, but then the trauma and how I made it in my head to work. And then started using it to manipulate men. I mean, in my own immaturity, I think it was, a lot of developmental stuff, right, was going on there. I didn't develop quite the same as a girl who loses her virginity in a more traditional way or whatever. So I looked at sex as a way to gain love.
The way that you say it's different for so many people.
It is.
Yeah. And so if I'm kind of channeling listeners right now, if there's listeners out there and they're like, I wonder if this is me. What are some things that would help them figure that out? What are some questions to be asking themselves? Is there any guidance you could give of like, is this me? Is this not me? Do I have a large sex drive, or I like to just have a lot of sex, or I need them to tell me that I'm okay? Is that love addiction? What would you say helps people figure out?
That's a wonderful question. And I'm just hoping that this will, want a listener to ask those questions. I would say, first look at your relationship history, maybe like, I can look back on all of my boyfriends then, and they're all either in prison, have been in prison.
Okay.
I'm serious. My girlfriends laugh so hard, but that was my picker back then, and so it's kind of like to ask yourself, what has my picker been? What's my historical picker? Am I finding myself in an unhappy relationship right now, trying to get him to be someone that he's actually just not capable of being? Like when I learned that I needed to date a guy to figure out if I liked him or not, that was really, because it didn't matter for me. I just wanted him to love me. If he liked me, then I liked him. If he loved me, then I loved him. If he wanted to be with me, then I would be with him. And so when I learned that I can make a choice, that I can actually learn to love myself enough to then start dating and looking for a man to be something that I would want in a man, then that was a huge, I may have gotten off topic, but anyway.
Right. No, you're right on topic. You're right on topic because you're helping other people listen and saying, wait, is that kind of the relationship I have?
Yes.
Am I looking for others? Or am I in certain relationships because they want to be in that relationship with me or because I want to be in the relationship with them?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Is it because I want to be loved? And you know what? I think it looks a lot like codependency at first. We all have that codependency, that's the term that people, well, I'm addicted, I'm just codependent. But like when you scrape that surface, it looks, so maybe they can identify more with being codependent. Listen, the term sex and love addiction for a female is very shameful. It's stigmatized. It just is, even in this day, when it does feel like we have more empowerment as women, and which I think we do, and I think we're growing so well in that direction. It's still very stigmatized and very confusing because we are so complex. It doesn't look one particular way for us.
Yeah, what I'm thinking about too, it keeps coming into my mind is that, and I'm curious, so with female sex and love addiction, maybe with men as well, but it seems maybe for some that there's a anxious piece. There's hyper anxiety regarding the dynamics around whoever you are interacting with. Does that make sense? So I'm trying to distinguish between what's a healthy relationship and then for women that are sex and love addicts, the different dynamics that go into just talking to men or talking to or dating or, kind of what that might look like. And I don't know if that's in the book or not, but it's a piece that I'm curious about.
I love that. I think that's really a loaded question.
Okay.
Darn it, when did that? But what you're bringing up, what first came to my mind was attachment styles, right? If we have that insecure, preoccupied attachment, then we are going to be more anxious. But if we also have that fearful avoidant, I've seen definite women in my office who identify as female sex and love addicts who love to get into relationships, but once they're in the relationship, they're working all the time. Or they are focused on the kids all the time, or they're focused on, yet they could not imagine being out of the relationship. But the struggle of being intimate with their partner, and I mean like true emotional intimacy, scares them so much that it's like, tell me what I can focus on, and they go straight to what they can control versus what they can't control, which is their partner. I do see that often too, but yes, more times than not, it is more the anxiety that comes up with that. So attachment, I think, has a lot to do with it. But I also want to go to the God rest her soul, the PMLD developmental model stuff, because I think a lot of this stuff is the adapted self. Either we're the wounded child or we're the adapted adult child, right? And a lot of it's that pendulum, like we're either the wounded child, the victim, and this and that, or we're the adapted self, which is, maybe sexual, maybe completely aversion to sex, and trying to control the sex in their marriage or in their relationship. I guess I want to go back to what you were brought up to about dating. I think dating is a very squirrely place for female sex and love addicts to get. I think it's a beautiful place because they're finally in that where they're ready. But boy, does it bring up a lot. It just, we're like, yes, I've worked on this and I've worked on this and I feel ready. I feel confident, feel secure. And then you get in a relationship and all the stuff is triggered and brings all of the stuff back up. And it doesn't make it go away, but it makes us challenge ourselves and say, wait, I've got other tools over here.
Yeah.
I have women supporting.
I find that as a struggle for men addicts in recovery as well.
Uh-huh.
I know that we developed a dating plan.
Yes.
A 5-page worksheet, looking at all these pieces before we make a decision to get into a dating relationship.
Yes.
And then, like I said, it goes back to, now these are my values. This is my plan. How do I stick to this mission statement?
Yes.
And is that something that you did when you got into the dating world?
Similar, yes, but I have to be honest, the dating plan felt too much like homework for me, or like schoolwork, or it just felt too rigid for me. And maybe it was just at the time, because as a clinician, I absolutely see its benefit. I mean, come on. I think it was just how I was at the time. Plus I have ADHD, and that didn't really go well with it was overwhelming, to be quite honest, to answer those questions and to really write out those questions. It felt overwhelming. So guess what I do when I feel overwhelmed? I don't know.
What dating plan? Where did that go? Right.
So in my book, I came up with, and it's called the Compassionate Structure Plan. And it is to go either in conjunction with your dating plan or as your dating plan.
Mm-hmm.
It's a daily checklist that you're going to go through, maybe even after you go on your first date with a guy, or maybe after you guys meet for the first time, and you're going to start then, and you're going to go through your daily checklist. And then on the second page, there's affirmations, really practical affirmations that women need to hear when they're dating. And then it goes into the weekly checklist. So we have a daily checklist, and then we have a weekly checklist. So that would be like maybe when you're in the relationship, you're month, maybe 2 months in, you're going to look at it weekly. Like, am I, the one that comes to mind right now, one of the questions is am I doing most of the emotional heavy lifting right now in this relationship? Am I the one who's trying harder than he is? Are my partner's actions matching his words? Things like that and these are just check boxes in my book, not things that they would have to write out, because sometimes we just can't think of the things. So they just check, and they can also add their own at the end. So I find that more helpful than just a dating plan, or not just a dating plan. I find it more feasible. Like I could wrap my head around that better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I want to say that Kim presented at ITAP, and I was fortunate enough to listen to her talk. And one of the pieces that she talked about in the talk, and also it's in the book, is this beautiful, what do you call this, Kim?
The mothering exercise.
Can I show it? I don't know
There
if
you
people
go.
can see that or not. Can they see it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about this?
Yes, I love the mothering exercise because I think this gives the female sex and love addict, and I'm saying females because it worked for me. Like all of this stuff is stuff I've done.
Yeah, good.
But I also do with my clients, right? So if they can separate themselves from the inner child and make themselves the functioning adult, the parent, then that empowers them to help that piece when they feel triggered, when the inner child feels triggered, when the inner child feels completely lost or helpless and hopeless in this relationship or in this situation. The mothering exercise has them pause and kind of, it helps to regulate because I ask that they ground themselves. I ask that they place their left hand over their heart and their right hand over their tummy. And then you're asking that inner child what she needs right now. And then the mother shows up. So you switch hands and put the right hand on the heart and the left hand on the tummy. And that switches the left brain to the right brain, or the right brain to the left brain. And then you become the mother and you ask that mother to then be what the child needs. Just a quick exercise to get them regulated, but to also empower them to start nurturing their little one,
And I'm thinking that the love addiction, the sex and love addiction starts because, as you said, with your history, that there wasn't enough attention given to you. There wasn't enough of a connection there. And so there's a piece that craves connection, craves love, craves, right, to be seen and heard. And so then what I'm hearing is that manifests in the addiction.
100%. It also has a lot to do with other things, but the family of origin, the inner child stuff, I think is a huge piece of it. I also think that generational trauma has a lot to do with it. I will have to say I grew up with both parents in my home. I never wanted or needed for anything. However, I grew up in a lot of domestic violence. I grew up terrified of my mother, but also knew that she loved me to pieces, like she did. It just depended on her mood. She had a mood disorder. She had addiction problems of her own. She was unstable. But a child doesn't know that necessarily, especially when it's a pill addiction, because I never saw her pick up a drink. So it's just like, this is just how she is. And then my dad was never home. So that's kind of how that manifested for me. I never felt seen enough. I was the middle child too. So that has, a lot to do with it. Middle child of 3. My brother was precious and he was the little brother, the sports star. My sister was the hero, the beauty. I mean, she was beautiful and the cheerleader and made the grades and went to the great college. So I just never felt like I checked any box, like I didn't fit into anything. So again, when the first boy, gassed me up, boy, was that I was primed and ready because I was starving for it. But I do want to say for generational stuff, I looked at my grandmother had to grow up. My great-grandmother went to prison when she was a toddler. When my grandmother was a toddler, my great-grandmother went to prison. Let me back up. Before that, my grandmother's father was shot and killed stabbed and killed in a bar fight. I'm from the country, folks. My great-grandmother owned that bar. So it was always speculation in my town that she had killed. It just was. This was in the 20s, the 1920s. So she gets busted for bootlegging and heroin in the 20s. My grandmother was passed from family member to family member until then nobody wanted her and gave her up into foster care. And then she was put into a boarding school. And then, but my great grandmother from prison paid for, because she didn't have money, because she was a hustler, you know? This woman was something else. She paid for my grandmother to have this education. So my grandmother was college educated and boarding school and educated, but she never knew how to love. She never knew how to love. So I would always wonder and get frustrated with myself, like, why do I feel this tether? Because I really did feel loved. I felt abused as well. So I had this like, which do I feel? But I also felt love. So why do I have this tether that's pulling towards like that desperation to feel loved? And I truly think it was handed down from Grandma Litton, because and others, but I can only imagine that little girl's yearning for her mom.
Generational trauma is something we don't often talk about. So thank you for sharing that. I think you exemplified it beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
What we talk about when we use that term.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So how do people find your book? And the book is I Do It For Her.
Yes.
How do people find that as we start to close up today?
Okay, yeah, you can find it on Amazon. It's on Amazon. I Do It For Her. You can also find it on sonopress.com, which is my publisher, and you can find it on my website, klcounseling.com.
Perfect. Thank you for being here, Kim, and for
Thank you
sharing your
all.
Thank you
story.
so much.
Thank you all
Yeah.
so much for what you do.
So for our listeners, if you like this episode, please share it with other people, especially if you know other women that might be struggling in this particular way. And we just so appreciate you listening to our podcast. And if you would like to follow us, then we can also make sure you get the latest episodes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.